Hello friends. This week I had an encounter with some immortals, and I want to tell you about the experience and what I learned from it. So this happened Wednesday night, and I am filming this Friday and it will be shown on Sunday. So Wednesday night I was sleeping, and I felt an electrification of the air around me during the night, and I woke up. And when I woke up, there were these two female beings in the room with me. And before I could speak telepathically or verbally or make any decisions at all, they took control over the situation. And I felt myself standing in the room with them, and then I felt like the entire space we were in slid and shifted into a different space. Much like if you were standing in a room and you were on one end of the room and there was a chair on the opposite end of the room, and by your will, you willed that chair to slide towards you. This is how it felt. It felt a huge pressure on me, and I felt like I was sliding or being pulled forward. And as this whole pulling forward happened, it was a shifting in vibration and location. And I found myself standing in this space with these two females. And I was just stunned at first, staring at them, because they were incredibly beautiful. Two of the most beautiful females I think I've ever seen. And I just stood there, and they didn't speak to me telepathically right away. I felt like the whole environment I was in was very contained. Almost like I wasn't able to move too much. I was sort of in a position of just being very still and observant. And I felt that my body's solidification was kind of coming in and out of focus and was anchoring into this reality that they had shifted me into. So I was staying balanced in my intellect, and in my observation mode, I carefully observed them. And they were just magnificent beings as far as physically appearing to me in all of my senses. All of my senses were strongly anchored with them. They were somewhere around 6 feet tall. They were wearing these Grecian gowns that were sleeveless, that kind of, gathered at the waist and then flowed down to the ground. And the gown was a beautiful sky blue, and it also had waves of pink in it, and it was a deep muted pastel color. Their hair was a very brilliant gold that cascaded down to their shoulders, and there was some flecks of other colors in there. Their eyes, when they were looking at me, I can't tell you exactly what color the iris was, because I was sort of captivated by the fact that their iris had little pinholes in the iris, the colored part, the iris, and I could see light shining through these pinholes. So when I looked at them, their eyes were light, but also their eyes were very physical in appearance. I could see the whole eye. I could see where the iris was, and I could see these little pinholes where light was streaming out. So they had, it was like inside of their body was light, but the outside of their body was this physical form, and the light from inside their body was shining through these little pinholes, you could say, out towards me. And I was just entirely fascinated with that experience. And they had also tied around their waist, they had a very long sash, 6 feet, of the same color, the same sort of light sky blue color with pink blended in. And they had tied this sash around their waist in a very intricate, complex looking artistic knot that just sat at the center of their waist, and the rest of the sash just dropped down onto their gown. And I was admiring the knot. The knot was intricate and beautifully crafted. And in a way, my mind kind of went back to some sort of Celtic knot. But I can't say that it was, but it's the way I'm trying to describe it. It was just a beautiful knot that they had created. I was just fascinated with their entire look. But the very interesting thing that was unique beside this look was that they wore these necklaces, and they had layers of the same kind of necklace. So the necklace around their neck, and remember it was sort of a Grecian gown, so it was sort of V. The necklace around their neck had stones that were multifaceted, like octagonal and you know, all the different kind of platonic type shapes. They had various many edges on them, many facets on them, and they were not all the same amount of facets. So I began to think I began to feel like they were geometrical shapes that had a purpose. And they had layers of them. It's just like if you were to take pearls here and layer strands and strands of pearls on your neck to where maybe you had all these strands, but these stones were fairly large. I'd say half an inch in diameter. And so when you layered them, I think they may have had maybe 3 layers. You know, it was a large amount of stones across their neckline. So you could see like 3 layers of it around the neckline. And the stones were muted as well. And I want to say opaque, because you know, from my artist background, it's really not muted. It was more opaque. In fact, their clothes were opaque. These stones were opaque. The hair was not so opaque. It was a little more alive, you could say. And of course, the light shining through their eyes was very alive. So then one of these ladies undid her knot of her sash, and she stepped towards me and she handed me the one end of the sash. At this point, I had not spoken. And so I took the sash and I was holding it in my hands, and I began to feel it. And as I began to feel it, my senses began to be more acute, highly acute. And I could feel this material. And it felt like a combination of a flannel gown or flannel pajamas. You know how silky, how smooth flannel pajamas feel? It was a combination of flannel feeling and silk, but not a rough silk, but a smooth silk. It was just incredibly smooth. But on top of that, it was, the material was very rich or dense in color. So there was quite a bit of color put into this material. So as like speaking like an art, you know, your paint can be translucent or your paint can be opaque. This had a very dense level of color and was extremely just smooth and silky, flannelly feeling, and had a good substance to it. And I just marveled at the beauty of this material. It had this blue depth, but also these sort of hints of pink in them. And I then sort of handed it back, and she retied this very intricate knot around her waist. And I began to think of where I was or who they were. And she said to me telepathically, "You can say we are immortals." And so I started with that premise, that, okay, these are immortal beings. I don't know who they are, where they came from, but I'm just sort of accepting what they're telling me. And she remarked to me that I was, in my mind, kind of just completely amazed at how beautiful they were. And she said to me, "We appear to you in the greatest form of beauty from your genetic memory, from your genetic lineage. And from my lineage, which I'm European lineage, Northern European, they pulled from my genetic memory, my blueprint actually. Remember, we have a divine blueprint, but the divine blueprint, of course, created this physical body, Northern European. So they pulled from this lineage pattern what my genetic idea would be of beauty. It could be different for some other race or ethnic group, or probably some other planet even. But for me, this was the most beautiful women I had ever laid my eyes on. So I felt like I felt like I was trying to say to them how heightened my senses were, because I was trying to determine what body I was standing in. Because as you know, I have experienced astral bodies, fourth density bodies and fifth density bodies, and briefly sixth density bodies. And I got the understanding that this was a fourth density situation, but what they had done when they solidified me is they brought in on purpose every bit of my genetic senses. The senses that are attached to this human body were totally anchored in a very tangible way, so that I could experience things on a more emotional feeling level. So one of the instructions that she had said to me was that in my exploration as a pioneer of consciousness, I had trained and adapted my consciousness to work more intellectually, more mentally. When I would be exploring these higher realms of reality, my mind was anchoring in these realities. And this is why when I experience my smart body, which many of you who follow my library here in YouTube know, the smart body that I anchor into is an extremely intelligent being. Her mind is so far beyond anything we could comprehend. And my mind has been expanding. Remember, my teachings about consciousness goes from a lemon to an orange to a grapefruit as we go up these densities or frequencies of consciousness. So it is my mind that has been expanding and anchoring into these higher dimensions or densities, not using dimension as a scientific term. It's my mind that has been anchoring, the intellect part of me that's been anchoring. And while I have been on those spaceships, also I want to mention this because this is all tied together to this experience. And you and those of you who are following have known about my spaceship experiences. I have videos. They have a device where they anchor your body, that you step on that device, they anchor your body into, densify it into their reality so that you are at the same vibration as the beings on the ship. And when I've been on those ships, it is solid. I pick up a device, I pick up something and I feel it. I sit in a chair, I feel it. I move something, or I move something on a table, or I pick up some kind of like a iPad idea. I pick these up, I feel them. So there is sensory experience in these higher densities. But in this experience I had this week, those senses were more tangible than normal. And so at that point, the next thing that happened was two male beings, well, first one male being came in the room, and he was dressed in sort of a Celtic, not Celtic, I'm sorry, Scottish Celt, you know, those kind of skirts that the Scots wear. It's my best description. It was from his waist to his knees. And it was not opaque. It's fine woven tapestry, sort of glittered, just sort of glittered with a little bit of light glittering on it. And it was a darker colors of maroon and blues, and just a darker, I couldn't quite tell for sure what the colors were, but there was little hints of glittery sort of color, glittery, like sparkle stuff you put on in art. You know, the little sparkles. It kind of had that. And he had some kind of a cape over his chest. Then, right after he came in, another male came in behind him, dressed similarly, or identically, I guess. And then they took their capes off, and these two males embraced each other in a hug, and I felt the energy from that. It was a very powerful, for want of a word, it was a very powerful feeling of love. And I thought, just for a moment in my human mind self, thought, I wonder if they are like expressing love male to male and female to female, because the two females were here, the two males were there, and you know, the idea that maybe they were, and we use the word here, gay. That's not quite the word I was thinking, but I was thinking maybe it's this experience is a male to male energy that I'm supposed to understand, or you know, two females, and was this love between two males. And I was thinking, is this how they express love in my mind? And the first male that had come in turned and looked right at me, and he said telepathically to me that this expression that he had just shown, he said, it makes no difference whether you're male or female. It's the same energy. And then he looked straight at me, and I sort of felt, if you were standing in the physical body, in the physical world where your heart started pounding, I sort of felt this excited energy inside of me as he was staring at me. And I thought, oh, this must be some sort of magnetism going on between now male, female, or it's whatever kind of magnetism it is. It can be between male and male, and now he's focusing that energy on me, and I'm feeling it. And it felt very much like maybe male and female attraction here on Earth, although I'm sure that that's probably the best way to describe it. I haven't had that kind of feeling really very much on Earth where somebody just overwhelmed me when I saw them. I know people do. I mean, we write love stories and movies all about love at first sight, right? So it exists. So imagine that. It was this overwhelming feeling of connectedness with this male form, and now this male being, and now because his cape was off and I could see his body, it was very muscular but very, very smooth. And I had this flash in my mind of my migration experience I had, and I have this in other videos, where I began to learn that we're having a great migration, that many of us are transitioning from here to other worlds, and we're going to be transferring our consciousness to other worlds and into new bodies. And I had in that experience, I told you in that video, these male beings come down from the sky who were wearing loin cloths, and they had these muscular, not hulky muscular, but very well-defined smooth muscles. And I remember seeing that. He had that same look. And I'm thinking, are these the same beings that were in that experience I had? Just a flash of that came in my mind. So it was quick. It was a very quick flash, because he's now beginning to move closer to me. And the closer he's moving to me, the more my sensory experiences begin to become overloaded. I am overwhelmed, and I am overloaded with a sense of some type of well, I've had ecstasy experiences before, and I've told you about those. It is like an ecstasy experience, but this was so overwhelming that I felt my body begin to unravel and sort of break apart, much like my dematerialization experience that I've told you in another video, where I felt the inside of the cells inside my body begin to break down and break apart. Not quite like that, but it's a sense of I couldn't hold it together. I just simply couldn't hold myself together, and I thought I would just come unglued, was the feeling I had. And as he came to me and he put his arms around me, I pretty much came unglued. I just exploded in this massive sensory experience. And this sensory experience was feelings and sensations that I had never, ever comprehended before. Just never in all of my life on Earth comprehended. And when he sort of moved back from me, but was still very uncomfortably too close to me, like I wanted to say, go away, move back. But he was so close to me that he was constantly causing this sensory overload. And I was just nothing but sensory. And then I began to sort of stabilize. And I felt that all of them had sort of come around me. And I began to feel like I was stabilizing. And as I was stabilizing, I didn't look at myself. I don't know what I looked like, because my physical self, I was totally just not even conscious of, but I knew I was stabilizing. And as I was stabilizing, I was feeling energies and sensations I had never felt before. And they were telling me that this was fifth density sensory experiences, fifth density frequencies and feelings. And then I was told that my traveling into other bodies, and now they know I feel in fourth density, because fourth, my friends, is so close to us, you can easily transition into fourth density from here. But fifth density, the frequencies and waves in the universe are different than our very small, narrow human band, because the human body, we perceive a very small band or small little group of sensory experience and waves or frequencies of the universe. Yes, we have 5 senses, and there are waves that come into the universe. I'm not a scientist, so please don't laugh at me. But there are waves and frequencies in the universe that we can feel, or we can see or sense. But in fifth density, that is greatly expanded, and that there are other frequencies, and maybe our scientists know about some of these other frequencies in the universe because they have instruments that can detect it. But detecting it with scientific equipment is not the same as feeling it. We may not have, the human body may not have the blueprint to feel these other sensory experiences. So there are unique experiences of sensory and feeling in fifth density that are greatly expanded from where we are. And apparently this has been a big learning curve for me this week, because I have been traveling to my smart body, as you guys know, mentally, with my intellect, because when I'm anchored in my smart body on the Syrian ship, or when I'm anchored in my smart body walking on Earth or somewhere else, it is a very mental, intellectual experience. It's highly advanced information. It's a lot of geometrical, sort of mathematical, geometrical, just ideograph, pictograph, just all kinds of language that we don't work with. In fifth density, they work with these other kinds of forms of language or information. They're packaged differently. And so my consciousness has been using my intellect all this time in experiencing fifth density and even sixth, the brief times I've been into sixth. And so now it was time that I deepen my experience with fifth density by bringing in the sensory feeling aspect of this reality, which I haven't been doing until they actually triggered it in me. So I now have an understanding of this density that some people in this great migration wave, and as said, it's going to be taking place over 200 years. It may not go the whole 200 years. It may crescendo somewhere in the middle of that. I can't tell you for sure. But I'm talking about a 200-year cycle before there is a reset, where I've explained in the last video, where we become more water-based. In other words, there are cities out floating on the water. That's in the previous video, so I won't focus on that. But in this greater wave of exodus from the earth, there will be some humans that go into fifth density and some that will go into sixth, but it will be a very smaller group, as the largest amount of us will be moving into fourth density, the Star Trek worlds, which are very similar to where we live now. Only remember, in other videos I've said, fourth density is telepathic, they're time travelers, they have premonition, they have a lot more spiritual skills. But we have those skills. This is why we're so compatible with fourth density. We have the skills. You have these skills inside of you. This is why I have my Patreon group, to help all of you start to awaken your skills, your telepathy, your premonition, precognition, your astral travel, your bilocation events, and all these events that are going to be natural skills you have to move out of the astral plane and earth and move into fourth density worlds and even higher. So this was an experience of what fifth density feels like and what kind of senses are in fifth density. And so this is the video I'm giving today, friends. And I look forward to having you come and join my Patreon group. We're now at the beginning of a new month, and it's always great to start then because we start with a new theme or a new topic. And I'm very focused on helping everyone develop their lucid dreaming, their premonition skills, their telepathy skills, so you can get prepared to make a migration to higher frequencies and worlds of light. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.